Hey, this is the second video regarding UI in the project. In this one I'm going to make a new widget and show some ways of connecting it to other parts of the project, the character and the game instance and a map. So this is what I'm going to do. It's in in-game UI. I thought this was another task we had, but if not we can add it or do it later. But this is going to be kind of just a dummy version of it. I'm going to display 3 pieces of data that are changed dynamically. And use the FPS game mode in a test map to use the interface for this, because the VR requires something in the world, and I haven't thought about how to set this UI up in the world because it's going to be attached to the character. So I'm just going to get started on it. These are all widgets, and we're in the UI folder, so I'm going to create a new blueprint. Under all classes, you can drop down. Nope, not what I need. Okay. Oh, instead of a base blueprint, we're going to go down here to the user interface blueprints, widget blueprint. We'll just call this BP W instead, widget underscore test widget. So I wanted to have the date top and center. This will change with each scene, and I'm going to simulate that by pressing 1 on the keyboard, and we'll add an event for that under the character, and then we'll get to the others one at a time. So we're going to need a text field, and you can see you can just drag it wherever you want, but we want it to be here no matter where we or what kind of screen we're using, and this may help with our VR setup too. I'm going to anchor it, and you can see these extra controls. I'm holding Control and Shift. I think Alt might do something, and I know it doesn't hurt anything, so I'm going to hold Control, Shift, Alt, and go top and center. It snaps all the way up, so I'm going to offset it a little bit by holding and dragging this. Now you can see it says text block right here. You have it say whatever you want. I'm just going to set that there, but we are going to bind it, create a binding. And this adds a function up here. It's its own graph, and you can see you can go between them. Here's the functions. We won't really do this, but here's the graphs. We have most things will have these 3, but in the widgets we're mostly only concerned with the event graph. So we'll go back to our function and we'll rename this get date text. We are going to want to return this. This is what's going to be displayed, and this is called, I don't know how often, but it's kind of like every tick, more or less. But we don't have any data right now, so we're going to eventually use the game instance. So let's drag off of here. We'll cast to game instance, and we have our Eros game instance, and this is what we're using across the whole project. Any other ones are either templates or default that we're not going to use. If we try to compile it here, you'll get an error because it needs an object pin. It says you have to connect something to it to declare its type. So we're going to drag off. We're going to get the game instance. And this is the kind of thing, there's not really any... We'll compile it again, make sure. So we're good. There's not really any way to logic out why you would go for this one. You just kind of see it over and over again and get a feel for it. But things need to know what type they are, and it doesn't just know that it's gotten the right thing when you say, hey, get this game instance. And now we have access to all of its variables and functions, so I'm going to go over to it first and create a date function. And we probably already have this, but I'm not going to use what we have hooked up anywhere else right now. So on our variables, I'm going to create a test widget date. And we'll change the type to text. And here in the categories, I'm just going to say dev tools or something, so it doesn't look like something we need to keep track of. We don't need to have any kind of a default value for it. And now I can come off of here back in the widget and say get scene date test widget date. The scene date is probably actually what would stay accurate right now. Oh, don't need that yet. Got that. I'm going to promote the game instance to a variable, and you can see over here, before I press anything, it's highlighted to me to name it, or I can just double click it and rename it. This is going to be our game instance ref. And now I can grab this game instance. I'm holding Control and click to drag it in. Otherwise, when you drag it in, it says, do you want to get it or set it? And I did get the value because we're going to want to get stuff out of it. Now, here's that test widget date. Just going to plug it in. Now, right now, if I ran it, there's no value in there because I didn't set default value. So we're going to make sure that we have that set somewhere and updated. And that we're going to control from the character. So we've got our date. Let's add all the elements in. Next thing available, countdown timer. I think everything I wrote there is actually just text, which is fine. If I put stuff in here and I'm going to bind it, it's kind of just to help me see what I've got when I'm in this menu. It doesn't, this countdown timer text that I have here totally disappears as we're going because I have a binding. So now I have that get date text binding, and I made a new one, get text 0, so we'll rename that. We'll say get countdown timer. Now this one we could actually do here. Let's see if I can. Maybe not in there. Let's go ahead and do it in the game instance. Yeah, you can't always mess with time stuff in these functions, and I can't explain that well. Can't explain why. But I've already got the game instance, so let's go ahead and grab this, and we'll create something in there to keep track of the time. So let's do the variable. It remembers the last type, so it's still text. We'll say countdown, or what do they call it? Test widget countdown timer. It's going to go into that. Oh, I already have it. So dev tools is one of my categories. So they're kept up here. Tidy. We're not going to change it here, I think. Have a, no. We'll change that in the character as well and just set it here. So I've got these two things that don't have anything on yet. When we get set up, I'll add the character logic that tells them what to be. And then data points left to discover. We're going to press 2 to change this one. Normally, as you walk over a data point, we would connect to the game instance and say, hey, decrement this value. This update each scene, when we go over the scene transition thing, or whenever the level changes or starts, whichever way we decide to do it, we'd say, hey, game instance, go to the next scene, and the date would be attached to the scene information, which is a structure that I created. So we've got the, let's see, it's a test thing, countdown timer. It's going to update it. These things are going to function the same way. I think the last one does too. It's pretty continually getting the latest value for this and displaying it. And last thing, data point stuff. So one more binding. Variable, get it in the right category, and we should have all the information, so we'll hook that up. Test widget data points, get it, feed that in there. So we'll head over to either the motion controller, or let's do the pawn. So this is the dude running around. We don't have a visual for him, but the other one is just the hands. And so we keep logic to that where, like, if it's going to reach and grip something, there's going to be an action on there to grip. Probably, unless that's here too. Looks like it might be here anyway. So we'll create a new custom event, or an action event. Let's see if it picks it up easily. Just pressed right click here to add a node basically. And I type 1, here's a keyboard event 1. So as we press 1, it's going to find our game instance. Just like in the other one, I created, assuming, wow. Looks like I never did make a game instance reference. So I right-clicked event begin play. It already had one, so instead of making one, it just took me to it. I am not setting up references anywhere here. What we've got is lots of stuff happening right when we start, and so I've created a sequence node, and it's going to do all of those. You can add more execution pins. But let's just tack on the top of this one. And we'll test the game instance. Game instance. Promote variable. This is our game instance ref. Kind of a local thing, so you don't have to worry about naming overlapping. And I will usually create a folder here for refs, because we'll want to reference the player character, reference the level blueprint, all kinds of stuff. And just creating those all at once. And putting in the same category lets you find immediately. So now we'll come down somewhere on the way. We've got this. We'll grab our game instance. And let's say pressing 1, which was to update the date. So we're going to set it. I need to get it. And I have a date as a text. So I should have had this as a number value, but what I'll do is create dates, and this will be a text. So what I'm going to do here, this is a bad place to have it. I should have this in the game instance, because this isn't relevant to the character. But I've got the dates. You know what? We'll just create it there. So we've got the dates, which is going to be an array, and I will just, it didn't show up here at first, so I had to compile it, and then we'll show you the updated type. These default values are me populating the array. So I have it highlighted. I'm over here in the details, and I'm just going to say something quick. I'll put some months in here. We're not going to worry about the format at all. Okay. So what I'm going to do is, as I press 1, get the dates. So I've got a reference to the array, and then I will get. I want to get a reference to a specific index, and I'm going to have to keep track of that. Every time I press 1, I will increase the index that I'm going to get into, and that is going to be the new date. So let's make date index. going to be an integer. I'm going to get the reference here, so I control, click, and drag, and then plus plus. Recognizes that from other languages just to increment it. We're going to start at compile so I can see my default value here. Okay, which is 0. And at first we're going to start with 0 before we press anything, and it's going to have that be the date. And then every time I press 1, it's going to increment it. And then I'm going to get that changed value and reset the date. So I'm going to need to update this to, alright, test widget date. I don't need to get this anymore. So I have the game instance, I'm grabbing the dates array and the test widget date. I'm setting this date to whatever my current index is, which is going up every time I press 1. And actually we could do a real quick boundary check here. So come off this value, I'm going to clamp it. You can start to see I typed in I drug up here and typed in size, so you can see lots of parallels to any other language, and it's all visual, but we're going to say the minimum is 0, the maximum is the size minus 1. Integer minus integer, size minus 1. So I can't go higher than the last index, basically. And this is going to keep me from getting an out of bounds issue. And so that is what I'm going to pull in here instead of the incremented value. That way, if I can press 1 100 times, it won't go higher than however long my dates thing is. So that you can see that if we add more scenes, add more dates, this will just work. It'll keep staying within whatever the new size of dates is. So we should have this updating. We can check it out real quick. But since we are in VR game, it won't do us any good. I can't add that. I don't have the VR set up, and I don't think we'll be able to see it, I'm thinking, without some special stuff. So this is going to be our, I created a new map, file, new level. It puts it in the wrong directory from where we want it, and it's not saved or named anywhere, so it's kind of just like an opened new file that hasn't been created. It won't be kept if we don't save it. So here, new map, I'm going to say UI test. And doesn't want it. If it refuses to save like that, it's usually that you have multiple instances of the editor open, so I'm not sure why it's doing it here. But we'll leave that alone for now. Normally it would go to the highest. Created a maps folder for me. Let's see if I can save it now. Maybe it's saved. Okay, so blueprints. I'm going to open the level blueprint. Every level has that, and this is really the only easy way that I've found to get to it. I have ended up stumbling upon it other ways. But this level is kind of like one large actor, and here is its graph, its blueprints. At the beginning of the level, I'm going to create a widget of our new type here, the test widget. And then, let's see, if it wants an only player, I should be able to get player controller. Like, a lot of these things are funky and overlap. Like getting only player, get player controller are kind of hard to tell apart. You can see this one is attached to the widget. This is the game, so the game's player controller should be good. Compiles, and I've created it. Normally we would want to check that it doesn't already exist, so I don't create it a bunch of times, but I know that we're not going to do that ever again. So we have our widget, we'll add to viewport. Because we created it, but we didn't put it anywhere. We'll get rid of the one we're not using, the tick. Never use the tick if you can avoid it. So now it's in the viewport, and we have our player controller. Let's, I said input only here. What I want is for it to interact with the UI only. And the widget focus right here, we're going to take our widget, and then we want to get our control one more time, and set show mouse cursor because it's usually hidden. Games you don't usually have a mouse cursor, but in the main menu you will. So it's true. And I think in the game instance I have a like set menu mode function, so we don't have to type this over and over because you'll see that that shows up a lot. Again, there's no way to know that you would need these things, and you just like be trying to make a widget and you say, hey, I can't click anywhere on the mouse, and you Google that, and that's where you'll pretty quickly run into this basic setup. So at the beginning of this level, whenever it's loaded, we should see this pop up and our widget should come up. So right now I'm on VR. Selected viewport is just the default thing, and I did not get the widget because I haven't set anything here. I think our default game mode is maybe VR. Let's try first person game mode, which should give us our regular character. And I can't move. So I can't move, so that's working. Widget. Widgets. This isn't right. Let's look at this test widget. See this little magnifying glass here? I'm going to browse to that asset. And this thing should show up. So maybe they're just blank. Let's remove this binding, and let's remove the data point binding for now. Control Shift S, save everything. Okay, so it was loading, it's just not getting a date. So come back to our widget. I'm going to rebind this to our get points left, so don't forget. And we are trying to get our date, test widget date. It's a quick debugging thing, and you're going to hit print, print the print string. We're going to print that string, which should be firing all the time for that. And I'm getting nothing. See if it'll print. So it's firing. I disconnected this pin, it's firing there, which means I'm not ever setting this date because I didn't set any values in the game instance. No, I did. Okay. Hook it back up. And I haven't pressed 1. That should be working, but I'm in UI only. So let's go to our map, and I'm not going to set it to UI only. Let's see if that lets me press 1. I know what I did. At least one thing. My motion controller pawn. Created this thing in motion controller pawn, but I need to do it in the first person character. So do I have one? So I found it, but I should have gone to this thing and browsed to it, and wherever I am, it would take me back to it. So come here, and you can, I cut the code from the last one. You can just Control X, Control V, Control C, Control V. The only thing it'll do is when I compile, you'll see that I don't have these variables. So I can right click it. Okay, when I right click on this, it gives me the option to promote to a variable, which means if I was here, I could promote this thing to a variable, but I don't want to do that. I already have a variable. I just want to say create variable, which is actually a really new thing, amazingly. So I'm going to create these two. Now they're here, and the rest of it should work. Let's see if that does. I have the controls. That binding must still be back. Keyboard 1 is not doing it, but I have errors this time. Set test widget date. Okay. Oh, message log. Accessing none. I have no game instance ref because I didn't create the game instance reference here. I added this variable, but I never did that the proper way. So we're going to cast to arrows game instance. And you see that I've already done this 3 times in one video, so this set of... Okay, I hit Alt and click and drag, and lets us set. It was Control, click and drag, forget. Here I'm going to set it. I'm setting the value that I want, so I want it to grab this in as a set. Okay. There we go. So it's constantly printing that string out. You can see the current date is updated here. I just cut this print debug thing out. But I'm pressing 1 again, and as I keep pressing it, it stays on April because that was in the array. So that thing is all set up and good to go. It does not show anything initially though, which we'll need to fix. So it doesn't show January. And that must be because I have the first index date. The date's what I'm getting in. And this thing doesn't have a default value. So let's go ahead and give it 1 here. We'll have to do it in the game instance. I can't do it in here because this variable doesn't belong to this stuff. So we'll come back here. Looks like I want to move this dates into my dev tools. Test widget date. Probably shouldn't do this way. Like I'm hard coding it here. I should get it into this thing. But we'll go ahead and copy our first value. If we were going to go back and forth, like jump around to different levels like we do have set up in the scene transition thing, it would go back to the 0th element and populate January properly. So this time we're just going to default to that, which is kind of like our launch date anyway, so it should be safe to do it that way. Okay, so I don't want that test text anymore. And the date should be good to go. Cool. And it's really the same way for these other ones. So I think since this is already pretty long, I'm going to leave the data points left off because I would just be pressing 2 instead of 1, and we'll go to the character here. Here I'm just incrementing the date index. I would have like data points left and I would decrement it instead, and I would clamp it again because they couldn't have negative data points left to find. We could Easter eggs, but and then from game instance I would go to a I would probably have this all coming off of here. I would say data points left, and then from the game instance I would decrement it and then feed that into the get my value there. It would decrement the data points and then set it again. So get, decrement, set, and then this widget would say data points left I would change to int instead of a text, and it would convert from int to text automatically when I drag to it like it did with the test string. So I'll leave that one alone, and this countdown timer. I really shouldn't have done these all as text. So I'm going to change that one. I've got countdown timer, get text. It'll convert that for me. So I'm going to leave this as text because I can't change that. And I'm going to go into my game instance and get that countdown timer and change this to an int. Yeah, I'm going to leave it as an int. We should do a float to like show the partial seconds. It'd be more interesting to look at, but leave that alone. Now on I'm going to go ahead and use this 2 key press to start a timer for, let's see, delta seconds. Okay, get world delta seconds is always ticking up, and I'm going to say my game instance and the seconds that are passing by. I'll get my countdown timer, and done this kind of timer in a while. As this is going, I would be setting a value and then saying if this thing is more than that. Yeah, I'm not gonna do this. That's only like it's like 5 nodes to do that, but I can't remember it offhand. So we're going to set a timer by event, and what this does is every 1 second it's going to loop, and it's going to fire an event that I want. So I'm going to create a custom event. This is going to be tick down. And we'll count down timer. And we are going to get our game instance here. And get the countdown timer and decrement it. So once a second, I'm going to decrement that. And I don't have to do a set. The decrement already knows, which is another fairly new thing, funnily enough. So now I want to get that timer again. And you can see here, I go from an integer to a text. It creates that convert automatically. I think we'll be good to go. Oh, I didn't clamp it, and I didn't set any kind of a time. So we will go to the game instance and have a default value of this to 5 minutes, so 300 seconds. Obviously not how we would want to format this. It's fine for this, and I didn't clamp it, so we'll go to the widget. And where am I decrementing it? In the character, which is nonsense. We shouldn't do that here. But this might be better in the level. So like when the level starts, I'll contact the game instance and say how long to the next one. And that way also, like if one level we want to have for 10 minutes, one level for 5 minutes, if that varies, the level would know that. The character has nothing to do with it, so this is a bad place for it. But we're out of here, so let's keep it. And I decremented it, and now I want to drag off of there and hit clamp. 0 is the minimum, and there's no max. And so now I do need to set it, which means I'm not going to decrement it. Okay, if I decrement it, it's already down, and I don't want it to go below 0, so I'm going to say integer minus integer, and I'm going to subtract 1, but it's not going to set anything unless I know it's not smaller than 0. So now I'm getting it here. I need to set it here, because all I did was do some math on a value. I didn't give it a new value. So every second I'm going to connect the execution here. This is my new value, clamped on the low end. And I want to see if that works. I'm not going to do this thing with a default value of 300. I'm just going to set it at 5 so I can see that right away. So it's going to, it's not 5 seconds. Time by event, 1 second. Oh, the max is 0. Okay. So I would want to have my timer, and we should be in the level blueprint here. My maximum is going to be its own variable here, and that would be the current level duration or something. And now its default would be, I had it at 300, but we'll put it at 5. Okay, so now we're ticking down. The max value that I clamped it at was the default, and it can't go below 0. So this would be simulating like if I have a portal that's going to open up, let me go to the next level. When this timer hits 0, it would say, okay, I have my new value, it's showing up there, and I'm in the level right now, pretend. So if I come down to 0, I would say, I would come off of this and say, if I am less than or equal to 0. It won't have to be less than, hopefully. I can take this as a Boolean value. So if I am, I can type in branch, which is our if statement. So you can see if else. So if I'm there, then I would say like open level. And from the game instance, I think. And then I grabbed off the game instance here. I'm going to say, do I have something? Yeah. So I have a next level variable already that I think is plugged into the level designer blueprint stuff. So I'm just going to open that level, and right now this is going to be kind of a garbage value, I think. Or maybe it'll take us to the menu. Let's see. So I'm counting down, and then when I'm less than or equal to 0, it should move me to a new level or break. So yeah, the next level was the default, which is the main menu. It's pretty cool. You can see it just plugs right in and does stuff. So that is like a little overview. You saw where I should input things like logic that has to do with something that a character doesn't. You think about where should this go, and I would cut this out and open up my blueprint, my level blueprint, and set this up in here. So you kind of see how things talk to each other. The level can get to the game instance. Everything can get to this, which is kind of like the hub of the whole thing. All of the game knowledge kind of goes through here. So this game instance was storing these variables that are called on and set from different places. Like the character is grabbing all these things. The level will grab these things, and then they're changing them. And then this widget that I set up will go and get them, and they say, hey, I want to use that data. And it is going to update the values here. I showed in the other video a way to set these things less constantly. Like when I started this thing with the debug thing, you saw it was going constantly, which is a great way to kill your performance if you're doing something more complicated than decrementing an integer. So this isn't something you want to do if it's not something you want to know all the time. I always want to know what my current timer is, so this is great. This January, February thing isn't going to change except when I go to a menu and say change my next level or something like that. So it's like a one-off kind of thing. I would, instead of doing it on a update kind of widget function, I would say whenever I'm in my character and I click on something, or when I'm in the world and I walk over a trigger, that would go to the game instance. That would actually, instead of going to the game instance for this, like if I walk over a pickup cube and I want it to say, hey, you found a pickup cube, then this thing, see over here I have edit pickup cube, I would say get all actors class. And now here, these are all the classes, mostly stuff that's in the engine, and then everything we've made. You can see BP for blueprint. I want widget underscore. And I don't have any. Maybe I just need to do widget. That wasn't the right way to do it. Well, I'm going to leave it at that because I'd have to look this up. But instead of getting all actors of class, I maybe would do like get all widgets or something, and I would find all the widgets it could be. And the same way that I cast to game instance here, I would cast to that widget and say, hey, is this that widget? And when the game's running, it's going to be able to know, but ahead of time it doesn't. So then it checks it, and if it's right, then I'll update that variable, because I don't want to do it constantly, only when I want to. I think that would obviously need some more explanation, so I would make something else for that if we wanted to do it. That is it. Thanks, and please let me know what is too much on here, or what you'd want to hear slower or more of.